You want to do the general intro just because we're recording, and then we can go.
All right. Hello, everybody. It's the coalition meeting. It was delayed initially from the beginning of the month, but because we have another meeting a week from now, we're going to have an abbreviated agenda. I think there's only one topic that's been suggested. We're going to talk a little bit about instant finality. And with that, I will turn this over to Eve. If you want to kind of kick us off on that, be great.
Awesome. And Bart, feel free to jump in at any time as well if anything I say doesn't make sense, or Guillaume as well. So just for full transparency, I've already given an update to Guillaume because obviously instant finality is their project, so we've been working with them. So kind of some bad news and good news, starting with the bad. We were expecting that we'd be able to merge the code for instant finality in preparation, I guess within the next month, give or take, in preparation for a hard fork from our perspective on the EOS side at the end of the year. However, in the last, I guess, 3 months or so, we've had roughly 3 to 4 months, we've had roughly 4.5 FTEs on this. And we found some very significant edge cases. So I wouldn't call them bugs, but we found some issues, the majority of them being able to be resolved and quite minor, but one in particular that's actually quite big, with a low to medium likelihood of it occurring, but the impact being of the highest severity, the impact being that the chains would have to face either shutting down the chain or allowing for a double spend. So it's basically, it's not a choice. It's the highest severity possible. That has meant that the engineers, the UX engineers and the ENF engineers have had to go back and redesign some of the things. And so we don't necessarily have a timeline on when the code will be ready to be merged for then the Antelope chains to be able to deploy on their respective sides. What we do know, and we've gone through this exercise, so this is all new. I was apprised of this roughly a week and a half ago while I was getting on a plane between South Korea and Singapore, or sorry, South Korea and Hong Kong. We then booked a call with Guillaume to get a better understanding. Internally, I booked a call with the engineers as well to get a better understanding. Our sense is that this will add a few months worth of work to be able to close those loop, add the extra tests, which means that from our perspective, the code will not be ready to be able to proceed with a hard fork, which we had planned for the end of the year, which is less relevant to you guys. But what's more relevant is the code will not be ready to be merged until, best guess right now, if all goes well, is our current plan timeline is end of April of next year. So it's a significant delay, although that's more of a conservative. We're quite confident we can meet those deadlines, barring any other unforeseen issues. But at best case, Guillaume and his team believe that maybe we'd be able to actually complete this sometime in January or February or something like that. Whole point being, it's not ready anytime soon. The risk is the likelihood is too high, and the risk or the impact is at the highest level. And so there's no way that this is happening. And so this obviously has impact for the coalition, as you all, I would imagine, had that in your roadmaps, as well as to when you would implement instant finality and what that entails, etc. So there are a few things there, and we can get into the more of the details later on, because there will still be a Leap 5.0 that we plan on releasing. But essentially, Leap 5.0 will not contain instant finality code. Leap 6.0 would contain instant finality code. And like I mentioned, best guess is that Leap 6.0, at least that part of the code, would be ready maybe end of April next year. So it's a significant delay. With that, I guess there's Guillaume and I talked beforehand, so for full transparency, because we need to let him know, because obviously his engineers have been working on this now without getting paid for the last year. So we started this project, I believe it was about a year ago, September, October last year, with the coalition. And essentially, UX has not met any milestones to date, other than what I guess we call milestone 0 of initiation of the project, which we released funds. We've agreed with UX that milestone number 1 and number 3, if you count milestone 0 as that initial milestone. Milestone 1 is around the design and the requirements, I believe, for, without going into too much details, like design and requirements for the project. technically not 100% complete right now because we've been going back and forth now for a while on that redesign and trying to fix those issues. So theoretically not 100% complete, but largely complete, and because we're working hand in hand with this. So there's that milestone, and there's milestone number 3. I forget what that entails, but essentially the ENF will be releasing those 2 milestones to the UX team because they've not gotten paid for any of this. So they've been paying out of pocket for the last year to get us to this point. And so on our side, we're going to release those payments for them to be able to continue working on this, because this April date that I'm mentioning has a few dependencies, one of them being that UX still keeps working on this, which at this point is kind of out of scope. We were not intending on having this drag on this long. It's nobody's fault. Nobody could have foreseen this. Essentially, once the code was ready to start being implemented, and then the ENF engineers started working towards this, in the beginning, the idea was that this would be, from our point of view anyways, maybe one of our engineers 1 day a week. It's turned into, for the last couple of months, we've had 4.5 FTEs on this. And for the foreseeable next couple of months, we will continue having 4.5 FTEs. That's just on the engineering side. That's let alone the administrative overhead, the project managers, product managers, et cetera, the administrative supporting staff around that. And so for us, it's also changed our roadmap significantly in terms of our resource allocation. Essentially, we've lost 4.5 engineers for the last couple of months on this, and only this. With that, so there's a few things. So we've agreed that we'll release some of the payments, milestone number 1 and milestone number 2. They're pretty much done, and this will give some much needed financial support to UX that's basically bearing the cost with nothing so far for the last year. And then we haven't asked for the coalition to be able to repatriate the remaining funds in the treasury to compensate for our engineers that are basically spending their time on this, and have been spending their time and will continue spending their time on this. So the treasury currently for the coalition has 681,000, give or take, USDT in there. Of that, there's up to 250,000 that had been earmarked for peer-to-peer work that's currently being done by OCI. We don't believe that the total amount will amount to 250,000. I believe John will be providing an invoice in our core group, and we're at 119 right now. So there's some leeway there. But we also have the peer-to-peer Fudan work that we need to close out on whatever those costs would be. And so there's potentially afterwards between $250,000 to $350,000 left in the treasury. And we would like to ask the coalition for support to actually get that back from ENF's point of view. We were 83% contributors to that, and essentially we're doing all of the work for instant finality right now that we did not envision that we'd have to do. It's taking our engineer and our resources away from other things that we were working on. So we would like your support for that. I know it's quite a lot to ask. And then I'll just give everything in one shot, and then we can open up for discussion, but that way everybody's got the same context. The other thing as well that we'd like to ask is for Wax and for Telos to consider what else they could contribute if they can, knowing realistically that most likely you cannot, but still we need to make the ask. If you could contribute other resources, as like I said, we're putting a significant amount of resources towards this instant finality. And without our engineers doing this, none of us are getting instant finality. It's just not happening. And we're the only ones who currently do it. So we're doing it for everybody else, but we would like, if possible, to get some financial help for this, knowing that everybody's likely facing a financial crunch, us including. If we don't do this right now, none of us are getting instant finality. So that's kind of a separate discussion, but that lays out pretty much all of the information that I have currently. Now we all have it combined, and now we can proceed with that. I said I'd start with the bad news, so that's kind of the bad news. The good news, though, is that we do want to continue with the coalition, and we do want to find ways to keep working with the coalition. We still think that this idea that we created 2 years ago is still very much worthwhile. Having said that, in order for us to proceed, there are certain things that we would want to discuss and change, because for us, we've been bearing tremendous cost for the coalition, pretty much 100% of the developer costs, 100% of the RFP costs, drafting, etc., management costs, administrative costs, marketing costs. Basically, we're doing all of it. And in order to continue to proceed, we definitely want to see something change from the other chains point of view in terms of contributing to Antelope itself, to the coalition as a whole itself. And I'm not talking about financial contribution, but just code-wise. We've seen that the other chains are working on their own projects for their own chains, which is acceptable, obviously, but there's a clear philosophy difference in how we're approaching this. So everything the ENF does, we do it open source and everybody else benefits, whereas a lot of the work that the other chains are working on is closed source and it's not contributing to the coalition. So we're not talking about financial contributions here. And that makes it very difficult for us to absorb all those costs, knowing that as well, whenever we allocate funds and projects for the coalition, that our engineers are inevitably going to be required to then merge that code and to be able to participate in that code. And so we can't actually put anybody else on anything else while the other chains are doing their own thing. So we're contributing financially more than everybody else, and we're bearing 100% of the engineering load. And that is just, especially in this market, is really not sustainable. But I think ultimately that's a philosophical difference that the other, that we would all need to discuss together type of thing. But I do believe that there is a way to figure out how we can get this done. And I do believe that the coalition has achieved quite a lot in the 2 years, in particular IBC, WharfKit, Instant Finality, which is now coming to an end, peer-to-peer improvements and such. So we've built something really strong, really good, and we'd like to continue that, but just maybe with some different changes in how we operate as a group, essentially. And welcome to the call, Chintai guys. Great for joining this one call. And with that, I guess I'll just leave it maybe to Bart to add to what I said in terms of the technicals of Instant Finality, or Guillaume from your point of view as well from Instant Finality.
I don't have anything that I really just need to add from a technical point of view. If people have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Right, likewise. Just one thing that maybe to clarify, and this is just the way it is, but obviously, as we entered that deal last year, we did so with certain, I guess, impressions that we would essentially get started on the verification of these milestones quite earlier. So, for example, the design questions that we were supposed to have validated last year in October were not validated until last month, basically. Last month, the work on that started. And unfortunately, although we did follow to the best of our abilities the I guess like the discussions that we had mostly with Eric from the ENF side over the last year, it turns out that some of the I guess more subtle complexities were not discussed until recently. It's only when we were able to bring the other engineers that we were able to identify some of these other issues. And unfortunately, from our side also, we have to look at the equity that is left in the mandate, that what we still can get in terms of payments. It would have been a different situation, let's say, if token prices were roughly around where they were when we started that project. But now, considering that, especially in the case of Telos and Wax, we're down 60% plus, that doesn't leave us with much justification for having our engineers basically working on this full time. So in addition to what Yves was asking for the ENF, I would like to also ask Telos and Wax to consider releasing the majority of the funds that have been earmarked for Instant Finality, so that we can essentially keep our engineers working on this over the next few months. So this is something that I would encourage you to consider. Although there is definitely like a lot of things that still need to be delivered, we're also looking at a much smaller like payday from the tokens that have been earmarked, because as you guys may remember, in our case, we're not paid in dollars, we're paid in tokens at a fixed rate. And like I said, we're already down about like 2/3 from that amount. So there's only 1/3 left there. So I would also ask for your help in releasing these funds as early as possible, now if possible.
I think it makes sense. I mean, from WAC's perspective, so it sounds like we've got a couple of topics. So topic number one, releasing of funds so UX team can continue working and competing in the project. So that makes sense to me. Number two, we also talk about some sort of a true up of the treasury, so that there's essentially more funds available. So
I would put that separately. So
Okay.
currently there are funds in the treasury that are remaining. I would ask for the support to just release those funds to up. So there's no extra add-on to that. So that
Right.
would be one decision for the coalition to make. The third would be perhaps a true up, which would just come from Wax and Telos, knowing that the likelihood that this happening is probably extremely low, knowing as well that the reality is all of the work we're doing is open source anyways. Nobody can pay
Right.
for this, and you're still going to get it anyways.
Right.
So we know that you're all likely facing the same financial pressures we're facing. So at
We
least
do.
release the funds in the treasury.
Yeah.
If possible, add a little bit to it specifically to complete this work. That would be greatly appreciated. Understanding the likelihood of that is incredibly low, but still having to make that ask.
So I think the question number one, whether we should release the funds, I think at least from my perspective, makes sense. So that's a yes. For true up, I think, let's find out what that number would be, and then we can make that decision. And then as far as helping with projects, so on our protocol side, our team has been focused on a couple of things. So what you're going to see in the next couple of weeks is support for Antelope chains in general on the Wallet Connect side. So that's going to be a public contribution from us. Hopefully that's going to help everyone, because Wallet Connect is a fairly widely adopted standard on the EVM side. So, we are adding that into our wallet, and we've been working with Wallet Connect to make sure that, there's essentially all chain IDs are included with the PR that we're going to be making to their repo. And then, once, Anchor decides to implement Wallet Connect support, then that's going to cascade through the whole ecosystem. So, hopefully that's a good contribution from Wax. I understand this is not necessarily something we talked about from the priorities perspective, but like you mentioned, Yves, I mean, we are working on our roadmap as well. Another one that's going to be a public PR is going to be some improvements to tokenomics that we're now pushing through. That's a separate discussion I think we should have at some point, what we're thinking and why we're thinking it. And then finally, our team is starting to work on the RAM improvements project that, we got all the guidance from Bart and his team a couple weeks back. Now, if we need to reprioritize our protocol team and help with some of the priorities that are on a roadmap, then I'm open to having that discussion. It's just, these were the things that we felt were more important to us than, let's say, instant finality. RAM is really, really high up on our priority list. And then user acquisition and opening up, the EVM ecosystem for Wax and for Antelope is also very high. But that's
really
open
cool
to discussion.
That's the kind of thing where I heard as well. I'm not sure, how if my understanding is correct, but I heard, for example, that Wax is thinking of moving away from the staking model to potentially like a gas model, which we have. It's the power up model. It would be something like, if, for example, as an example, maybe this example is not a good one, but if, for example, Wax is taking something and considering going that way, why not take the power up model, improve it? That way everybody gets that improvement. Whether or not we choose to adopt it is different. So I like
Yeah.
the approach of, you're not looking to see whether or not we agree with what you're working on is of value to us, but you're making that contribution to Antelope, which benefits anybody, regardless of whether or not
Correct.
they choose to adopt it.
Yes.
That's what I think has been missing for the last year from our point
Okay.
of view.
Well, yeah, maybe it's also part of the communication on our side, because I should have maybe surfaced these projects to you guys and spend more time explaining why we're doing it. On the tokenomics, we are still keeping the staking model, but you know, TLDR is that the first change is going to be that we're going to allow people to use staking for power users, but then you will be able to also pay kind of like a, you know, equivalent of a gas fee from stake per transaction. So let's say if you've run out of resources because you've run out of the allotment from your stake, you can then start consuming your stake, and that's non-replenishable type of thing. And as part of that, we are going to be developing a module that is essentially estimating all the different resources behind the scenes and rolling it up to only one fee, which means from the user perspective, it becomes very easy, understandable. People who are coming from EVM chains, you know, they don't have to think about these different parts of the resources. And then the final thing is we're going to then take that to also allow people to pay per transaction without staking as well. And that's going to be the next step. So it's not like we are removing the staking model. We think that, you know, staking has its place, especially if you want to allow kind of like, you know, I see that as a use case for, you know, whale accounts that have a lot of wax stake and they're doing a lot of operations. But then there are users that are, you know, they don't want to stake, they don't want to purchase a lot of resources, and they want to pay as they go. And then we want to also open that up without breaking the staking model. Now we've looked at power up, and you know, we didn't really want to go that route. That's a separate discussion altogether. But you know, I don't mind taking a second look, and maybe there is something there that we missed. But the changes that we are making are gonna be on the protocol level, allowing these different I guess, you know, gas models.
Maybe we could actually add that item on whether next week's agenda or something like that to go into the details of that
Sure.
power up / the staking model. And maybe we can kind of circle back to the instant finality discussion right now. But yes, that type of work, that type of thing is what we've not seen that we would like to see from our point of view from the NF.
Right. So like
Telos
I said,
would be
I mean,
another example with EVM.
Yeah.
We've got our EVM that's open source. I don't see why at this point, for example, Jesse, Justin, Telos is not picking up from that and actually adding to it, or you know, taking what's good from it or what's good from yours, adding it onto there. Like, it benefits everybody. I don't see at this point why Antelope chains are working in silo, closed source on things that everybody else is working open source on. It, to me, that's the disconnect right now. But that's just a larger discussion for next steps for Coalition that I'd like to have as a conversation. But for today was really just this idea of kind of dropping the bomb of instant finality is not going to be ready for the next couple of months.
It's a good information, because we were planning, you know, the tokenomics changes are also a hard fork type of a thing. So we were hoping to merge it into 5 and do this dance of you know, shepherding exchanges and all the partners through node upgrades once, but it sounds like that you know, we'll have to do it twice.
Well, so I guess for clarity, we're still going to do a Leap 5.0 that's going to be released end of November, or will be released shortly, I guess, relatively shortly, but we will release, I guess, in full version after everything's been tested, but it won't be a hard fork. There will be 2 components in Leap 5.0, which technically could cause a hard fork, but we're not going to recommend to open. So one are the BLS host function add-ons and the deferred transaction removals. But from our perspective on EOS anyways, we just basically told this to the BPs last night as well. We have a BP call monthly. There are other improvements whereby we recommend people upgrade to Leaf 5.0, but those two we're going to recommend people do not turn on because it requires a hard fork, and then we're
Right.
not going to want to coordinate a hard fork. Leap
Right.
6.0 would also then be the hard fork. However, in the meantime, we would likely encourage people to deploy 5.0 on Jungle and then do the hard fork on Jungle and turn those on so that we can essentially test for a year and people can start preparing their applications for that inevitable hard fork in Q2, Q3, Q4 of next year with instant finality, with BLS host functions, with the removal of deferred transactions, and potentially anything else that you're working on, like you said, if somehow we can incorporate all of that.
Right. That makes sense. I mean, we'll just plan it out and see how that works out with our deadlines. And everything that I've talked about so far, which is this Wallet Connect and the tokenomics, revisiting tokenomics, and then also the RAM, you know, this is all not going to be in a black box. We're planning to contribute that to the Antelope core. We made a decision, you talked about EVM, we made a decision not to deploy EVM on Wax. It just
as a whole or temporarily?
Temporarily. This is something we want to revisit maybe next year. We just felt like the complexity that it adds to chain operations and BPs in general is not something that our BPs can bear right now at the, you know, at the cost of operating our nodes and where the market is. I think we need to wait until 2024 and hopefully we'll see some life in you know, Bitcoin and Ethereum, and then the altcoin season should follow in 2025.
Cross your fingers.
Yeah, but right now we like everybody else, right? We are really hunkered down and trying to push through this period.
Jesse or Justin, I'm not sure if you guys want to chime in.
Yeah, I was about to talk. I said something, but I let Lucas go. We kind of started at the same time. So there's like a dozen things I wanted to respond to, but didn't want to interrupt. So yeah, as far as reimbursing, you know, you guys at DNF for your time from the Treasury, that's pretty simple. You know, you guys are the biggest contributors to it. I don't see why within what is left after everything we've committed to that you shouldn't be able to be paid back for your time, especially since you're putting more in towards instant finality, a lot more than you expected. You're right. We, as well as everybody else's, you know, Treasury situation is no better. So it would be a hard conversation for us to have in terms of, you know, topping back up into it. But as far as what's already in there that we've contributed a small amount of, I mean, as long as we're not exposing ourselves to more risk because we've committed to things. So I'm you know, comforted to hear that you've already analyzed the Fudan and NOCI commitments before considering what might be available to get you guys paid for your contributions. So I would be in full support of that. Obviously, I need to speak a little bit with others before making decisions on other things. As far as giving all the telos for the IBC and faster finality is set aside in an account waiting for distribution. I would want to discuss it with others. My instinct is, yeah, we want it to get done, and if that means we need to release it so engineers can get paid, I'm all for that. I need to discuss. Only concern would be like, what if things get worse? Are we in a situation where now all the funds are exhausted and we still haven't delivered the faster finality piece? I don't see that happening, but
well, the solace there is that we're gonna deliver anyways, and then everybody will benefit from it anyways. But yes, I guess there's theoretical possibility that we find something else, although I don't know what the likelihood of that is, Bart or Guillaume. And at this point, it's been like the 3-4 months of super deep dive into this. I believe we found an exhaustive list of issues. I don't think there's another secret monster, but theoretically, I guess possible. But at
Well,
that
as long
point,
as the-
we'd have to surmount that monster anyways. I mean,
Yeah, I would imagine as long as the exhaustive approach that you've been taking for months now is taken towards, the next few months, you're not going to find something new if you have already.
one,
Didn't
even if we
need it.
did, at this point, we've like our cost for this was, I guess, if you include instant finality, was like 2.5 million, 2.6 million, give or take. It would make no sense to not finish the product at this point. We even talked with Guillaume, if, for example, UX could not contribute to it anymore, the ENF engineers theoretically could complete this project on their own, and we would, but now we'd be talking about potentially more delays. But from our point of view, instant finality is happening. That's not the issue. It's how quickly can we complete it right now. So it's not a jeopardy of not happening, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, and we want to get it done as close to our original plan as possible. We don't want to go on contingency basis and rely on, that approach that you described. So, yeah, I mean, I would imagine that's fine. It would be unfortunate. I was looking forward to the 4-way liquidity pool on UX and everything too. But if that has to go towards paying engineers, engineers need to get paid. I definitely sympathize there. So, yeah, I can discuss with the rest of the team about just releasing all that. We had a chat going where we were going to try to get it over to UX through IBC so you could put it, and I think we tried to ping a couple of times to figure out how to do it via multi-sig, but that didn't happen. So
Yeah, I think at this point it would be easier, just like the simplest way, simplest way
Yeah,
possible.
yeah. So I'll discuss that. I'll take that away and get you an answer or a transaction ID on that. So what else? I think that covers like the finance and coalition. So a couple things to respond to you. Like the EVM, yeah. At this point, the only thing that's left that's not a public repository is the actual contract. We could open it up. I don't think anybody would use it. Maybe they would, but just to be clear, I tried pretty hard, and I don't want to say aggressively because I tend to not be too aggressive in my approach towards things, but I tried pretty hard to work with Matthias and find a way that we could kind of converge what we've built and what you guys were building, and those conversations kind of just dwindled. So, I mean, I don't want you to think that I actually did the opposite, which is what it sounds like you described. I wanted to find a way.
I apologize. So I'm aware of that, and I know you did. I guess at this point, it was more so at this point, the EVM's been open for a while. I imagine that you're still working on your EVM from what I know. At this point, I don't see why we wouldn't collaborate together. Everything is open anyways. There's no more, whether or not though, what you're working on can be added to the current public open repo or not, that I have no idea. But I do want to also make it clear, because we're recording this, that I do know that you've extended efforts and that you did try to work with us. I believe at that time, both repos were closed. So we're perhaps talking about a while back, and there was Trust EVM in the mix. But at this point, is like all of the chains are, we're all in this crazy bear. I still believe that this original idea of us working together as a base, especially during hard times like this, is even more valuable. Like, let's contribute to the same code stack right now more than ever, to the benefit of everybody else, and share our resources essentially. So I didn't want to insinuate that you did not offer, and I do apologize if that's how it came out.
Yeah, no, and to be perfectly clear, I think I've had this conversation with a number of different folks, inside, outside of Telos, that I think that the reason those conversations kind of didn't go anywhere is because there were differences in the architecture that you guys were going to take and the architecture we already had deployed. And so it just was going to be a whole lot more work to try to converge the two. So as a result, I think it just made sense for you guys to focus on your approach and not try to make any adjustments so that we could also leverage, you know, the same software, maybe not the entire stack, but parts of it, right? So I don't want to, so I'm trying to make it clear. I don't think it was a bad decision on either side, and I understand how it ended up going that way. And also to highlight where it is today, you know, what we're doing, because of the lack of synergy, it would be difficult for us to reuse, you know, things that you guys are using, or you guys use the things we're using. I mean, we still have a completely custom RPC built, you know, by myself and a couple others, and we're just trying to fix a few things and get to a point that we can start on our 2.0 design, which is something that is similar to the way you guys run. So maybe once we start on our 2.0 design, I can reach out to whoever's kind of leading the EVM at that point and see if what we're doing there would make sense, because I think there are some interesting things that we've learned and plan to try to do that might be improvements, you know, to the way you're doing it or simplify it. So, and I'd be happy to take that call and figure out if there is an opportunity once we get there. Right now, to be perfectly honest, we're working on what we call our 1.5 release. We've hit a couple snags. We've got a custom build of NodeOS that substitutes the WASM, so we can go back and extract different traces from the EVM transactions that happened over the past, you know, 2 years. So there's some challenging stuff that's also open source and maybe interesting for anybody, you know, in Antelope to be able to go back and run a different contract version to extract more data from transactions that are already executed in the past. I don't know, that's a very low level tool, but it's something that we're doing for our EVM. So that's one thing. Kind of to go on to the other aspects of contributions. We don't have these calls often enough, I think, or maybe they're the right cadence, but just, you know, we're just so heads down individually on our different networks, so we don't know what others are doing. But I'll share a little bit about what Telos is doing. Well, first of all, you know, our Open Block Explorer was an attempt to contribute back to Antelope. It hasn't gotten adopted as much as I would hope, and the multi-chain version is not yet deployed. I know Pomelo kind of funded the DLT team a little bit to do that. That hasn't gone as far as I'd like to see it, but I'd love to see that, you know, benefit everybody if we can. That was one attempt that Telos made to contribute back with open source software. Then, you know, as far as our current plans and what we're focused on, I don't know if everybody's noticed or heard, but we did hire a pretty well-seasoned kind of veteran in the ZK ecosystem, the zero knowledge ecosystem. And we're focused on leveraging zero knowledge technology for all the things it can do. So some of the things we're working on will benefit, you know, the industry. Antelope, obviously, being a focus of what we're going to do there. Can't share too much, but it's an interesting kind of paper that's being worked on now that hopefully comes out before the end of the year with some really interesting things that will be Antelope specific initially. So just kind of scaling zero knowledge proofs and verification of them with anticipation that they're going to be a bigger part of technology, you know, in the years to come. For that, also, we are going to be probably making some PR requests to add more intrinsics that offer more cryptographic, you know, functions that we would need to do modern. And this, you know, might message you to see which one you benchmarked. You said it was Groth 16. So we'd love to get some of the primitives we need to do, you know, Plonky 2 and some of the more modern proof types so that are more efficient and going to be used more in that industry. So those are things we're planning on doing. Obviously, you know, we need to do some prototyping, figure out some of the designs we're going to do. But just to give a heads up, you know, those are anything we do, we don't want to be working NodeOS or the protocol. We want to have it part of the base layer and everybody benefits from that. So it's good. So that's kind of one of our big focuses now with goals of being able to do, you know, layer 2 networks that are Antelope, or leveraging some of the really interesting work that Polygon's done with their ZK EVM, things like that. So that's a bit of what we're focused on, which is, I guess, a little bit outside of Antelope, but where Antelope is part of the interface would be definitely contributed back open source. Anybody that wants to follow our lead and benefit from what we do is obviously welcome to do that and reach out to talk about what we're doing and how we're doing it. So I wanted to share that. And then I think to that point of contributing back to the coalition and things like that, we're not there yet, but it could be like, I mean, I've even been chatting with their engineer on this call, trying to iron out this last issue we're having with the NodeOS substitution that we're doing. Because once we release our 1.5, we're going heads down on our 2.0, and I would add that to the open source list of things, that we would contribute back potentially. And if you guys would benefit from it in any way, when we get there and we start that work, we kind of at least get our initial prototype design captured. I'll make a note to reach out to either you or whoever's the lead for that EVM effort, to see if there's anything that you guys would be interested in. Share our plan, how we're going to do it. The Silkworm kind of hybrid design that you guys went with was a design that I had initially kind of arrived at when we were thinking about how to do EVM better, and shared it, with Matthias. He arrived at the same kind of conclusion of taking that approach and using an existing Ethereum client. So we're looking at other Ethereum clients and different ways to kind of merge the two technologies. And so, once we get to that point, I'll definitely reach out and see if that can be another opportunity to contribute back.
That'd be awesome. Yeah. But just before you continue, while I think about it, Jesse, this is none of what we just discussed is public yet. So obviously this call is being recorded. We last night hosted our BP call, and we informed the VPs of this instant finality thing. We asked them to keep it quiet. So we always, after we hold our BP call, we do a written report of the BP call that we publish. It typically takes a week. This video is going to be published in roughly a week. In the meantime, our comms team is preparing communication materials about instant finality and kind of the current situation, etc. So just to be clear, nobody knows about this right now. So you viewers, as you see this, by the time this gets released, it'll be accompanied with a bunch of communication materials around this. In the meantime, for those on the call, please keep this to yourselves as we actually release that comms material to all stakeholders, basically, over the next week type of thing. I don't know, Zach, afterwards you can chime in on kind of the release of that, but just so everybody knows, right now we are recording this, but it won't be public until we actually release these materials and this video, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, so everything's being written as we speak, based on the messaging of last night's BP call. Obviously, our person writing it is going to watch this video also to infer this discussion, to include it in the written piece. Our target is to try to get it out tomorrow. If we can't, we could delay, and that's okay, till Saturday or Monday. But we could share everything in the coalition Telegram group in advance, so that everyone has a warning to make suggestions if you don't like how something's worded, or also just to give everyone a heads up of, hey, this is going to be published in 12, 24, however much lead time we can give, we will give it. That way we could all communicate it to our communities at the same time.
Because we realize that has impact on your guys as well, if you had particular timelines. So we'll prepare all that material, and that you can also then obviously reshare and repurpose and reuse, so that everybody can communicate to their respective communities basically the delay of instant finality.
And everything I've said, I expect it to be recorded and broadcast on YouTube. I pretty much assume anything I say anywhere.
Yes. But the timing of when it gets published is important in the releasing the message, is all I wanted to clarify.
That's fair. The only other thing I was going to add, and I was just thinking back to everything everybody else said that I wanted to interrupt on, and Lucas, that the work you're doing is definitely interesting to us. We've been talking a lot Again, Alberto, who joined us, he's our ZK expert. He was the CTO at Horizon Labs, who was a Zcash fork and built all their, zero knowledge privacy stuff. And he's more recently, he came to us, he was at IOHK, the Cardano ecosystem, working on a sidechain focused on data privacy for Cardano. And so he's evaluated, he's looked a lot at Antelope. I spent weeks walking him through all the code, how it works and everything. He has some pretty direct feedback. He's a great guy, but he was pretty clear about like some of the incentives being aligned, and block producers, why would they even put transactions in a block and certain things, and the staking model, and a lot of what we arrived at was it would be interesting, really interesting to see a fee model like what you mentioned you guys are working on, Lucas. We're not embarking on anything in that direction, but we've talked a lot about some of those different approaches and how other networks have done it. So I'd be really interested to see kind of if there's anything you can share about what you guys are planning to do, and kind of how the whole economics and tokenomics would work. Be super interested to see it, and it's something that we might be interested in using or contributing to if it makes sense at some point, because it's definitely something we've talked about a lot, and I find makes sense to me and the people we've spoken with about it. So just wanted to add that in there, that's interesting to hear it, because it's definitely a familiar kind of direction that we've talked about.
Cool. Yeah, we'll share what we have at some point. I think the algos are still being baked. We thought we were done, but then we opened it up for our BP review, and there's a lot of discussion about actual implementation. We're still kind of revisiting especially the CPU portion, but there are some documents that I can start sharing with you guys, and feedback is always appreciated.
Yeah, one of the components we talked about a lot is just further aligned interest. A lot of the exercises and time I've spent with Alberto for some of the zero knowledge stuff that we're putting together is really about creating a system where nobody can game it to the other side's detriment, right? So just aligning the interest, and one of the things was with a fee model, if the BPs would benefit from those fees, right? Just the really simple system that gas on an EVM is, or not on an EVM, on like an Ethereum EVM, where the validators are incentivized to find ways to get transactions in blocks because they benefit by receiving more fees. It's a twofold of running the infrastructure and the technology, but also bringing attention and traffic to the network through other means of marketing and things like that, right? The more activity they can help generate on the network, the more they directly benefit. It's like a win-win. You create a system where everybody has a common goal and interests are completely aligned. Is a lot of the concepts that we've thrown back and forth when we talk about what changes might make sense. So that's where fees come right in, So anyway, that's all I had. Thank you.
That's awesome. I mean, this has been the biggest, heaviest meeting we've had in quite some time. We were kind of coasting now for a while as projects were going along. So I think this is pretty good. We have a follow-up meeting next week because essentially this was an ad hoc one. So maybe for next week, Jeff, we can add a few items on the agenda. One, I guess, what Lucas mentioned earlier and the work they're doing on the staking / I guess gas. I don't know what you'll call that model, but we can discuss that. Yeah, and see where that could go. And then maybe we can also have as an item from ENF's point of view anyways, and I guess from Guillaume's point of view too, to make an ask of Wax and tell us what that would look like. So obviously you could go back to your chains and see what that would look like in terms of a top up, as you were mentioning. It would obviously help if we gave you something to ponder on. So maybe on our side we can think of something, and then have that discussion next week.
So
outside of that, just to kind of maybe wrap up / capsulate what I believe the next steps are from this particular call. Lucas and I guess Jesse, on your side, both of you, I guess we'll go back to your respective teams and see whether or not, but it seems as though you theoretically approve of the release of the remaining funds in the treasury to the ENF, barring the extra, I guess, or capturing, or I guess taking into account the extra liabilities we have, which would need to be paid off, the P2P and the basically P2P, Fudan P2P OCI. So that would be one. And I guess you'll also go back to your respective teams to find out about the release of payments early for the UX team. I think those are the two concrete next steps before next week. Is that the idea?
Sounds good to me.
And then
I think Jesse just left, but I'll ping him and
and we've already agreed that we're going to release our payments to Guillaume, so that should offer some much needed liquidity and relief on that side.
much appreciated.
And obviously we support the ask of asking Telos and Wax to release their payments as well to help out on UX team. Outside of this, Jeff, is there anything else that I'm missing? I'm kind of doing your job. I should let you do that. Sorry.
You're doing great. No, I don't think so. I think those are the two items. I took the first note down earlier, so we should be fine there.
Awesome. And then maybe in the chat over the next week, we're going to expect a few things. So one is on our side, John will be posting the current invoice for OCI, the work peer-to-peer to date, which I believe is 4 or 5 months worth. I think it tallies around 119,000. There's that. We're also trying to close up. So Fudan, that's another item. So I brought it up. Obviously, we have something there. We're looking internally to see what work they've done and whether or not we can continue doing work with them. So we may have some payments to release as per milestones. My impression right now is that we will not be able to finish the work with them because they're not at the level that we need them to be to finish this work. And so it requires a lot of our engineers to basically let Fudan do their work. And we don't have the bandwidth. The engineers are not in finality. And so we're looking at what we can do with Fudan to either stop the work and just make them whole with the work they've done currently, or like basically how do we close that file? Because essentially I do not believe that they will not be able to complete the work that they've bid for, and so they're essentially not going to get all of the payments for the work either. But we cannot support them, and they're not strong enough to do this on their own. So we're trying to wrap that up as well, and so it should mean that in total the amount of monies we had put aside for that will likely be smaller. The payment will essentially be smaller than what we put aside. And instead of letting them drag on and us being able to maybe support them in the next year, we're going to try to close that file essentially. But if you recall, all of these contracts are between the ENF and those teams because the coalition doesn't exist as a legal entity. So either way, it's on us that we'll bring forth a recommendation to the coalition, and either way it would be essentially us paying it from the treasury of the coalition, but essentially the contract is with the ENF. So I'll update you on that next week if there are any updates on that front.
Had to jump, guys, but thanks, and we'll catch up soon. Thanks, everyone.
Right, and I think that's it then, because now we've lost quorum. So either way, but I think that's it, unless there's anybody else that wants to chime in with anything else.
Nothing from me. Good stuff, guys. Thank you.
All right, take care. Later, Justin.
Bye all.
Gotcha.